So hello and welcome everybody. I will try to fill the time to make it possible for more people to participate and to join. I think the process is still ongoing, but meanwhile, I already want to welcome you to our, I think, very timely debate. So the idea to make this a Europe debate was born on rather short notice. That's also why the invitation came at rather short notice. But we thought, or kind of, I found myself actually having problems to form an opinion on this, because I had for a long time advocated kind of for the EU to be more open towards Russia prior to the war. But now I've found many good arguments why a Schengen ban basically for Russian tourists isn't such a bad idea. But then I heard other arguments, and I just thought it would be a good opportunity and a really kind of controversial topic to debate, and a very timely debate, because the decision will be taken now kind of today or tomorrow in Brussels. So we will discuss today the motion the EU should ban Russian tourists from entering the Schengen area. That is the motion we want to discuss. And we have two people, two great experts who I greatly admire for their expertise, and for once they are in disagreement with each other on this very issue. So I invited both of them because they really know their stuff. And I was very curious to hear their arguments. But before we hear them, I want to basically bring you, or the audience, into the discussion and do a little exercise to feel the temperature in our virtual room. And we now start our poll. So you see the motion again: the EU should ban Russian tourists from entering the Schengen area. And if you say yes, you're in favor of the ban. If you're no, you're say no, you're against the ban. Don't know, that's totally fine. You can also say, well, I haven't made up my mind. I'm here to learn and to listen. So, but I would like to ask you to give us your opinion on this very issue before we actually start the debate. I do this now as well. Oh. Hosts and panelists cannot vote. Perfect. So you need to do the job. And so maybe we can, do we have a result? Angela, first result? Yes. Okay, so you can share it so that we know what our starting position is. And so more people are against the motion and in favor for kind of granting tourist visas to Russians, but it's 47% versus 35% and 18% who don't know yet. That is basically the picture before we debate. And Kristi, I think now it's up to you to change this. Kristi Raik is the director of the Estonian Foreign Policy Institute at the International Center for Defense and Security. She is one of the most renowned experts on Russia, but also on defense and security matters. And so now Stefan and Kristi will start, have 6 minutes each to make their argument. And I start the clock now, Kristi.
Thank you, Jana. Indeed, my answer is a firm yes, and for three main reasons. The first is that this gives the EU more influence on Russia. The second reason is that the visa ban is in line with our security interests. And the third reason is moral considerations. So let me briefly explain each of the 3 points. Listening to the visa ban debate, I still hear quite a lot of naive thinking in Europe about how we can influence Russian state and society. I mean, we have changed a lot. We have given up already the idea that we could have a positive economic interdependence with Putin's Russia. But regarding tourism, we still hear this strange argument that having tourism could somehow transform the Russian society. There is no evidence to support such claim. We've had very active people-to-people contacts with Russia over 30 years, and this has not increased support for democracy, and it has not made Russian foreign policy less aggressive. So we have to be more sober and realistic and think of new ways to have influence. And I'm afraid in the current situation, what really could bring about change inside Russia is a clear military defeat in Ukraine. So that has to be the main goal of the EU, of the West. And we have to do all we can to put pressure on the Russian regime and to increase the cost of aggression. And banning tourist visas is clearly one way to put pressure on the regime, because it does matter to Russians, and especially to those more wealthy Russians who do travel to Europe and whose views matter to the regime. Now, of course, the Kremlin will have its own narrative and blame the EU for this ban, but the Russians are not that stupid. I think they will also understand that it's Russia's own policies that are causing isolation. And now the second point, security interests. The West is at war with Russia, whether we like it or not. We have kinetic war in Ukraine, but we have ideological and economic war between the EU and Russia, and we need to adjust our policies accordingly. And we need maximum isolation, not just to put pressure on the regime, but also to protect ourselves. Okay, most of the Russian tourists just come for fun, but some of them come to harass Ukrainian refugees in Europe. And some of them enter with tourist visas to actually conduct influence operations within the EU. This has happened several times in the past. And for Russia's neighboring countries, the security risks are considerable. I mean, during the past 6 months, close to 1 million Russians have entered the EU, and majority of them have come through 2 countries, Estonia and Finland. So this is a huge burden, and these 2 countries are not able to thoroughly check all of these people. And they really don't like being in this position of transit route for large numbers of Russians coming to Europe, coming from a country that we all agree is a major security threat to Europe and is waging brutal war against one of its neighbors. So I would really expect other EU countries to take our security concerns more seriously also on this matter. And then finally, I come to the moral considerations. This is, I admit, a bit more tricky. We can't have a morally perfect solution here. But the problem that I have with moral arguments that are made against the visa ban is that they are focused on the perspective of Russian citizens. But let me stress that the ban is not about, totally closing the borders. We would still be receiving asylum applications. We would still be open to people coming on humanitarian grounds. By the way, we have a large number of Russian dissidents in the Baltic States. They have been welcomed. So we don't want to close our border to these people. But then what is missing from that point of view is the Ukrainian perspective. So why do we still keep prioritizing the Russian perspective over the Ukrainian one? I mean, for Ukrainians, this is a really painful issue. It really feels wrong to them that they can see, the families and relatives of the Russian elite going to Europe to have fun as if nothing was happening. And they are very strongly arguing for this visa ban. And let's also put things in proportion. I mean, a visa ban is not causing, pain or suffering to anybody. It's just unpleasant and annoying for the Russians. Thank you.
Wow, that was 5 minutes and 51 seconds. That was perfectly in time. Stefan, Kristi set the bar very high here in terms of timing. So now you have 6 minutes to tell us and Kristi why she got it all wrong. Shoot.
Yeah, thank you again for this invitation, and I think for this very timely discussion. I don't want to say that she gets everything wrong, and I think we should really take into consideration also the security perception in the Baltic states as a front state also towards the aggressor. Yeah, so and that the majority of the people are coming through, for instance, Baltic states, but also Finland. So it's not only about the Baltic states, it's also other countries. But I think I would not agree with all the arguments, and I just want to go through some of the arguments. So the main question is, what is the goal and what would be the consequences of this visa ban for me? So I think the main goal, and I think Kristi already made these points, I think it's a kind of punishment also of the Russian society, who in majority, according to polls, support the Putin regime and the war. These people should not be able to travel as tourists to Russia during the war. And I think there's always this argument also about we failed in the end, in the past, also to influence and change Russian society. And we have this moral support for Ukraine, that Ukrainians can move free in Europe, but Russia should not be able to do so during they are in a war with Ukraine. The second goal could be to close the opportunities for Russians to travel, to increase the pressure on the regime. I think you also made this point, and to complicate the circumvention also of sanctions for individuals. I think that's also an argument which is often used, that they circumvent also somehow the sanctions. I think these goals will not be achieved with the visa ban, and I think it's rather counterproductive also. I think Russia has I think we have to understand that Russia has developed into a totalitarian state in which every opposition towards the regime, protest or criticism of the war can have harsh consequences, including prison camp for several years. At the same time, we have huge propaganda and forced isolation of the Russian society by the security forces and by the regime. So it would help the regime to additionally isolate society. I call this double isolation, and to get arguments for the propaganda that there is Russophobia in the West and no alternatives to Putin and his regime. I think it would rather strengthen the regime in a country where security-wise everything is under control. There is no really political alternative at the moment, and there's huge propaganda. And I think we would even play into the hands of the security elites, which have an interest to isolate Russia and the Russian society. But it would not increase the pressure on the regime. So I think neither punishment nor pressure on the regime will be successful strategies. As we can observe with the reaction of the liberals and the opposition from Russia, they are against this ban. So majority of them spoke out against again, because it would further isolate society, and it will make it more difficult for critics or opposition people to leave the country. According to the statistics, the number of humanitarian visa, and you mentioned this also, is very small. It's a few hundred visa. Most of the journalists, opposition people, critics of the war and the regime left the country with a normal Schengen visa, because they did not get this humanitarian visa so easily. I think this opportunity will not be there, or will be only very limited. And I don't see that there will be a changing system soon. As we have seen it with the travel ban and sanctions in Iran, we did a bigger study to compare Iran's sanctions and Russian sanctions. The liberal part of the society has been weakened, and the security elites have been strengthened to this kind of isolation policy. The more the society is isolated, the easier it is for the regime and security elites to manipulate the public opinion and to weaken any kind of protest in the country. Only 30% of Russian society have passports, while most of the economic and political elites have either a passport of an EU country or long-term permits of residence. So while these people can travel, these people we want to sanction, we don't want to that they come into the EU, normal people will more suffer from such a decision. A majority of the tourists, I think that's an additional point, and those who want to leave the country are not traveling into the EU, but in countries which are free without visa, like Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, and Serbia. And especially for small countries, and I think that's also understandable for the Baltic states, the pressure with more Russians coming in, and also in long term will have a destabilizing effect in economic consequences. And we can see this already in Armenia and in Georgia, how destabilizing this huge inflow of Russians is. So the fundamental EU's goal, and I'm coming to the end, should be to have a short, middle and long-term strategy, not only for Ukraine, but also for Russia. Change can only come from the society, and I agree with the argument. We have not been super successful, but I think there was a change of the Russian society, even if it's only in the big countries, in the big cities. But I think there was a change happening. To isolate the Russian society even more will not support this change. It will be understood as a punishment. Openness and the opportunity to travel and see how people live in the EU can counter Russian propaganda. I also understand the civil society exchange has not brought a big change in Russia, but at least partly it changed the country, and especially young people have increasingly changed their values in Russia. This regime tries to change this with an education policy and the isolation of the society, and a visa ban will support the regime. So I think,
and now I need to stop
you. I think that's my main point. So I think
you will
there will
both
be one more or two more sentences.
Yeah, but you will both have the opportunity to dive deeper into the arguments, as I hope you are both challenged by our participants. So, dear participants, if you want to come in, I mean, we are kind of a good crowd, but not that many. So you could come in by raising your hand and we could give you the floor, or you just type your question into the Q&A section. I already see 2 hands, and I would encourage you. I know that there are some experts on the call who have written about this, but it's not about co-statements. It's really about challenging the argument and kind of hearing more from our speakers. It's not about criticizing the setup as such. So Raphael, you're first.
Okay.
Maybe you can introduce yourself with one sentence.
Hi, I'm Raphael Bossong at the German Institute for International Affairs, and I got the hint. So I wrote a paper about this in German, which is only available in German. Don't worry, I'm not going to run through the whole argument. But I will make one statement, and I can also make it into a question which is fair, not too polemical or leading. I really don't think this for and against ban is getting us forward. So I would encourage, I could make my own suggestions, but I would encourage the speakers here to set out paths of compromise where we can limit this flow of Russian tourism. And I think there are various tools to do so, and at the same time maintain both short-term and other forms of visa, not only humanitarian, there are also other options. So I think there is a whole range of instruments that we can think of and talk about and get beyond this super hard pro and con, which I think isn't really helping us. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael. And for the German speakers, please read the paper, SWP, Raphael Bossong, on this very topic. Maybe I give it back to both of you now for a short answer. So do you see, Kristi, we start with you. Do you see any kind of compromise kind of that Raphael has hinted at, something where kind of both sides could be bridged? Is that possible, or do you think it's either all or nothing, or we need to be kind of very strict here?
With the EU, we always end up with a compromise, right? So this is, I think, going to be also the result in this particular case. But when I listen to people asking for compromise, they actually stress the same issues that I already raised, that we are not fully closing the border. This is not the point. The point is to end tourist visas. And why my argument was that this needs to be done. This is actually targeting the wealthy part of Russian society, the Russian elite, people whose views matter to Putin's regime. And to argue, as Stefan did, that Russia is a totalitarian regime and isolating it makes it easier for the regime to control society, and to kind of shut down any dissenting voices. In the short term, this might be the case. I grew up in the Soviet Union, and it was very closed. It was closed by, of course, by the Soviet leaders in order to make it easier to control people. But it also did have this effect that people were very dissatisfied with not being able to have openness. And even though, to some extent, the Kremlin propaganda might succeed in, creating this narrative that this is all the fault of the EU, we have our own message. And I don't think this will totally fail to come through to the Russians, that it's Russia's own policies, Russia's own aggressiveness that is causing the isolation. And if Russia stops the war, then we can go back to a normal engagement again. This is our narrative, and we have to have more faith also in our narrative. And then the totalitarian regime like Russia, it can look very stable, but at some point it will break. And it's likely to come very suddenly, and then all these dissatisfactions that are there and the tensions will kind of burst out. And I hope this moment will come when we can have a new beginning. As I said, I think it will come if Russia is defeated in Ukraine.
Okay, that was more doubling down on your original point and not so much an offer for compromise, but you said compromise will come in the end. But maybe Stefan, what do you think about another kind of third way, kind of that this is the wrong question, that we need to approach this differently?
No, I think my main problem is that there are not other opportunities for people to leave, or very limited opportunities. So if we reduce the tourist visa, I think we need to increase also humanitarian visa, and we need to also to change the bureaucratic process. I think it's also all about security, and people need to be checked. Yeah, I think that's very clear. But if I see how few people in the end get this humanitarian visa, how difficult it is also to travel, how difficult is it to get also this permanent residence. Yeah, I think after humanitarian visa or after Schengen visa, it takes you have to get also this residence if you don't want to return, or if you cannot return. And I think that's not really working, in my opinion, this system. So I think it needs alternatives for those who are not just want to travel and who want to have fun, but really need to leave the country, or they disagree but don't have the opportunity in the country to disagree. Yeah, and then we need to work with these people also, which we are not doing enough. Yeah, in the European Union, we need programs for these people, and we need also a long-term strategy to engage with them. And I think that could make sense for me. But I also think we have already, so every member state has the opportunity to give more or less visa in the system we have. And I don't know if you really need to change the system fundamentally. I think is it a discussion we need? I have an impression it's a very, very much moral discussion we have here. It's also driven partly by Ukraine, but also by some EU member states. And I think there are already less visa. Yeah, so there are also less opportunities, because the people in the embassies have been decreased also with the help of Russia. Yeah, so. And I think we maybe have already the flexible systems, but we don't use them. And at the same time, we should maybe more discuss how to help those people who cannot easily leave the country, and in a country which will be more and more closed, and where it will be more and more difficult also to leave this country.
Okay, next question, and then Kristi, you have a chance, but I want to bring people in and hear from them. Alessandro Politi.
Yes, hello, do you hear me?
Yes, very well so.
Well, I wanted just to argue on a couple of points, and I will start with morals. You know, we have already adopted the Ukrainian perspective in every, sense, and in very concrete ways. Sending weapons is not something, morally easy, and it is politically very significant. But, you have to distinguish between morals that have a sense and morals that are just symbolic. And this is just a symbolic case. I understand you, but coming from an Italian perspective, allow me to show you another way of looking at things. So we do prioritize the Ukrainian point of view, but this, and I come to security, doesn't mean that we are at war. We are not at war, exactly as we were not at war during the Cold War. There is a big difference between war and peace, and I think you understand it. So we are neutral, but our neutrality is not a strict one. It is a very friendly neutrality to Ukraine, and that is a point. The other point concerning security is that, frankly, we don't need that measure to protect us from, intelligence or influence operations. We have other means. Intelligence is for that. And if you have a high influx of people, well, it's not the first time that in Europe we have high influx of people and we manage it. Immigration is a case in point. And again, you might understand that from the southern part of Europe, this is a very, long experience. So we like it or not, there are ways to handle this. And tourists are, mostly of them, tourists. And I add another point concerning security. We lose the opportunity to recruit people. During the Cold War, we had a Science for Peace program in NATO with Soviet Union. People tend to forget it. And we have now suspended all scientific cooperation, including in the Arctic, which is absolutely against our interest and against global interest. So I think that this measure is, nice for the symbolics, but has no substance for security, and it is politically absolutely unhelpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Europe Debate is about Europe debating. So I think it was interesting to have a voice from Italy. I think that was mainly directed at what Kristi has said. So Kristi, I give you the opportunity to answer. And whoever wants to challenge Stefan, just let me know in the Q&A and gets the floor immediately. But Kristi, what do you say to our Italian participants?
Yes. I mean, thank you. Thank you for these points. It really shows how big differences we still have among European countries, EU member states, in terms of how we see Russia, how we see Ukraine, how we see the war and its impact on us, and how we should deal with this war. This visa ban issue is not symbolic. I mean, I don't want to repeat my arguments again. And we are not neutral vis-a-vis Ukraine. We have very clearly chosen the side, and we are condemning the aggressor. And we are trying to help Ukraine to win this war because it is in our security interest. And it has been a difficult choice for the EU to make. I mean, the EU has difficulties to pick a side. I mean, in principle, this is something that it is not used to doing. And now the situation is really the situation of confrontation that we are in. I can understand people can be uneasy with the concept of war. We can argue whether it is the right one or not to describe the situation, but we have an antagonistic relationship with Russia. We have agreed in the EU and NATO that Russia is a major threat, the major threat to European security. And when it comes to cooperation, for example, in the field of science, personally, I would be in more normal circumstances very much in favor, and I have been doing cooperation with Russian colleagues, and I have seen it as a helpful way to keep up contacts. But in today's context of war, this is also no longer possible. And we are not in a Cold War-like situation. During the Cold War, we had more stability. We had a kind of balance of power with both superpowers agreeing more or less where the dividing line is. But today we have Russia violently trying to impose its own vision of European security, and kind of trying to re-establish sphere of influence. And it's Russia that is making it possible now for my Russian colleagues with whom I have cooperated in the past to continue cooperation unless they have left the country. Because they are afraid today to have any kind of contacts or cooperation with colleagues in the West.
Thank you very much, Kristi. I said I give the floor to whoever wants to challenge Stefan to keep some sort of balance. Iris, are you going to challenge Stefan? Otherwise, I know Vigaudas Uzakas will certainly challenge, or I mean, that's my assumption. But Iris, do you want to challenge Stefan? Otherwise, I'll take you after the next speaker. Not Stefan? So then,
do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I will not challenge Stefan, but I'm so much agree with Kristi. She is completely right. I mean, what is a tourist visum about? It's not about humanitarian issues or academic cooperation. And I just recently spent my holidays in Estonia, and it's full of Russian tourists, and said this has nothing to do with humanitarian issues. So that's my point. I agree with you, Kristi. Well done.
Okay, I was asked.
Short and sharp.
I was asked to ask people who come in to introduce themselves. So Raphael Bossong has been, or is a researcher, a senior research fellow with SWP. Alessandro, I guess, is a journalist, if I'm not completely mistaken. So just my apologies. You should introduce yourself when you come in, and I failed miserably as a moderator. So Vigaudas Uzakas, and could you introduce yourself? I know who you are, but maybe others don't.
Hi, Jana. Can you hear me? Stefan and Kristi.
Yeah.
Good. I'm Vigaudas Uzakas. I'm just, an observer at this stage of development, but former EU ambassador to Russia. You know, first of all, thanks for that discussion. I think as we discuss, foreign ministers are deciding. So we're probably too late to influence that discussion. However, I just wanted to make a point that, you know, first, I mean, of course, in a larger debate, theoretically and politically, I mean, no one can impose a collective responsibility. Yes, but not exactly. You know, we are at war, and the problem is that it's not fully appreciated through the entire European Union that European Union is at war with Russia. Russian Federation has waged the war against independent country of Ukraine and is threatening to the rest of European Union. And therefore, and that war is taking place in a hybrid, but also in conventional, through conventional means, which has to be responded resolutely with both force and hybrid way as well. Personally, as Stefan and Kristi know very well, I've been an advocate for the people to build contacts between Russia and European Union during the first war since 2014, and we managed to increase the budget of the European Union from 5 million to 20 million euros annually. So we used to host like 5,000 Russian students in the EU, but now being on the front line, did it pay off? Has it made any change? No. In the big picture, it went even worse. We have a conventional war taking place in the neighborhood. So therefore, I think, Russian citizens must assume a shared responsibility for the elected government actions, which led to the war against Ukraine and threats to the EU and NATO. And that's what we have to acknowledge. You know, it might be unpopular, it might be popular for Putin in the immediate perspective to blame on the EU, but talking to many Russians, meeting them in different countries of the European Union, I know they care about freedom to travel. But guys, it's about time. It's about time to choose. And that's what we have to force our fellow Russian citizens to make a choice. Thank you.
Maybe that was more a statement than a question. Maybe I take Peter as well. And I want to apologize to Alessandro, who is, of course, the director of the NATO Defense College Foundation. I was confused in my head, so I'm sorry. And Peter, could you introduce yourself? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Wonderful.
Do you? Okay. Hi, Jana. I'm Peter Karaboy from Bulgaria, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Dnevnik BG. We are actually a journalist for a couple of decades. My point is here probably on the side of Kristi. I have to mention something very special, and it concerns the perception on the both sides of the border. What is the right to freely travel as a tourist in Europe? From European point of view, this is the strength of our free societies, that we have open door for everyone who wants to come here and to abide to our rules and rule of law and democracy. From the Russian point of view, unfortunately, this is a demonstration of weakness. Kristi knows very well that in the Soviet time, the system was, there is a school that says that the system was based actually on threat, fear, and lies. So now we have a fully empowered system of threatening their own people, but they are using this open borders as a lie that Europe is on a weak side. They are using it as a argument for superiority of Russian and Putinism system. So we have to choose at some point the understanding of what's the perception of free travel as a tourist. We will use it 10 times, that the conversation is about the tourist visa. What is the perception from both sides of the border? Are we on the weak side, or are we on a power side in a fight for free society? So I'm rather on Kristi's side. Let's remove the lies one after another, the lies of the Putinism. Close the borders for tourism and make the Russians think twice about what's wrong with their society. They will keep for a couple of years with the lies that they're much better, that the future belongs to them. But at some point, they will start to ask questions. So this is my point.
Thank you. And I'll give that immediately to Stefan. So Stefan, kind of, are we showing our weakness in Russia's eyes if we keep the border open? And also the point about the society and that needs to change. You said openness can change Russia, but what do you make of the argument that it hasn't worked for ages? I mean, that's what we tried, it hasn't worked. So why are you so confident that closing the border will not change anything?
No, I just first want to say that even if maybe some of the member states of the EU think they are not on war with Russia, I think Russia is on war with them, yeah? And this not only since February this year, but already earlier, latest since 2014. I think we should not forget this, yeah? So I think, and that's crucial. The second point I want to make, and then I come also to your question, I still think the visa ban is not the right instrument. I think we are doing not enough that Ukraine is winning this war. I think that's for me much more crucial in terms of weapons supply, in terms of also longer term supply and support of the Ukrainian army. And I think that's for me more important than the effect which this visa ban will in the end have. So I'm also not so sure how much this should be in the center of the debate. And I think it distracts also from other issues which are maybe more important in the support of Ukraine, and also in that Ukraine and we are also winning this war. Yeah, in a way, I think it's also our war, even if we don't want to drag into it. I think we are part of it, and it's about our security. So I'm not so sure if Russian leadership is really understand this as weakness if our borders are open. I think we know that Russia always used the visa issue as a bargaining chip. Yeah, with the diplomats in the past, and also our entry of normal people or of tourists into Russia. I think it was always a kind of a bargaining chip, and we might also use it as a bargaining chip, but I don't see at the moment really the bargaining. So I see rather really this kind of isolation, this kind of argument of putting the society under pressure to think twice. And I don't see that this will lead in short and middle term to a change in Russia. It will in short and middle term rather strengthen the regime. In middle and long term, it might weaken the regime, and then we can compare it with the Soviet Union. But I just think that that this is a different Russia. This is not the Soviet Union. It is also still integrated in the global economy, and we will not be able to isolate Russia completely. We are living in a different world, and it's not only about the West, it's also about other countries. And I think that should be also part of our mindset. We are thinking very much Europe or Western centric here. And I think there might be other opportunities. Okay, then it's maybe fine. Then they are going to other countries. But I don't see this total isolation of Russia and putting Russia here under pressure, or pushing the Russian society under pressure, that they put the regime under pressure. So what was the second argument? From this argument, I just.
One was about weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And one was about, basically how can we better change Russia? Isn't kind of closing a means of changing kind of the debate inside Russia?
No, I think it's really losing this war. I think the defeat of Putin and the Russian army, I think that will have a major impact on Russia. And I think it's also important that Russians outside of Russia, which want to have a different Russia, can keep the contact also to the society. I know this is very difficult. I also understand that the impact is very limited, but I think there are other issues which are, in my opinion, more important. And I think isolation will not work. And I think we should rather think about how to keep these contacts and how to change also, or how to use the people who are outside of the country, which still have a kind of an exchange also with the society. So I don't think that will work. So I'm rather skeptical here.
Okay, so I will take two questions from the Q&A section, written ones, and then give the floor to Raphael and Agota. We have 15 minutes left before we go into the final kind of voting. And so there is one question from Nelia Vridzina, if I pronounce that correctly, Ministry of Croatia. And she wants a comment from both of you if we should avoid public debates like this on topics where within the EU we have a wide range of views, given that such divisions, I mean the existing divisions, seem to undermine our unity and common goals. So is it helpful to argue in public about these divisions, or are we kind of weakening ourselves and maybe by being so transparent, showing Russia where our weak spots are? And then there was another question by Milan Antonievich, and I don't know the affiliation, but he pointed to the very interesting fact that there are other countries, like for example Serbia, who would maybe undermine the ban if such a ban existed. So Kristi, that's maybe for you. He argues that for this to be effective, Serbia and other countries have to be fully cooperative with the EU. And yeah, that is that an obstacle? Or do you think that is likely and feasible or not? And then, I have three others. So maybe we collect, because I really want to give the floor to you. And you have 2 minutes for your statements in the very end. You cannot answer all the questions in 2 minutes, but maybe we hear from Agota, Joanna, and then Raphael. And if you could limit it to kind of really a quick question or remark or comment, so then we could give more space to Stefan and Kristi for replies. Agota. And could you introduce yourself? As I said, I'm a miserable moderator and I cannot identify people, and then I fail to ask them to introduce themselves. So please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm just an ordinary citizen from Finland. My name's Agatha.
Completely fine.
Okay, and so my full support is to Kristi. I have heard and listened to her opinions and takes for a long time, and I 100% agree with her on those. The thing is that I do think that this visa question is like so the visa as such, the tourist visa, seems to me like a weapon. So it's a weapon, and I do agree with Peter, or I don't remember the name, that Putin doesn't actually respect anything else but something tough. And if it's tough, then he starts to listen. And that's why this visa ban, or the visa ban kind of means or a tool has not been introduced so far. So I don't like these, or I think it is not a very wise thing or take to say as a preconception that we haven't tried this, that I don't think this would work because we haven't tried this before. So that's exactly why we should try this, because we haven't tried this before. And this is something that must be then tried, because there is a war and we must take our side. It is a black or white. There is no in between. I am on the opinion that you cannot now be in the gray area somewhere. It's a brutal genocidal war taking place, and I find it very, very hurtful somehow from Western European countries who live far away from Russia and have some different kinds of attitudes towards it, or have had and made enormous mistakes during the previous decades, politically and economically, that they are the ones that they are still saying that I am not so sure whether it would work. I'm sorry, but here people are dying, and on the other hand, here are countries that have to deal with this enormous problem of tourism, Russian tourism. And I also agree with that Russian the issued visas, or the visas issued, is a weapon in Putin's hand, and an unissued visa is a weapon in the EU's hand. And that's how we should, I think, see it, that who is the stronger one in this.
Okay. I need to cut you off because I have more people coming in. I think your point was pretty clear, and it was again more a statement than a question, and both can comment on this later. So Joanna, Raphael, and Niels, and maybe consider this to be a speed dating exercise. So really, really kind of short questions.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. I'm Joanna Hossa. I'm a policy fellow now with the Wider Europe program at ECFR. And I have a question. I would like to understand a bit more the dynamic between Russian tourists and European citizens, essentially. So as I understand, this initiative or this idea comes from mostly Finland and Estonia that have seen a significant number of tourists, or they are becoming more conspicuous in the context of war. And Kristi, you have mentioned that there have been cases of Russian tourists harassing Ukrainian refugees. Can you tell us a bit more about this? Where did it happen? And more generally, what is the relation between the citizens of Estonia, but also Finland, if you know, between the citizens and Russian tourists? Are there visible tensions? Have there been some instances of I don't know, confrontation, like not with refugees, but with people themselves? And what are the attitudes? Are there like clearly anti-Russian tourists now among the population?
Thank you. Raphael and Niels.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, I understand EU bureaucracy and compromise might be boring. It's not always right to go for compromise, but I really would double down also. We shouldn't just wave this aside and say, there will be a compromise, I'm not interested in the details. The details matter. We should have a common response, and this entails some compromise. And this is not a German lecturing. I think it's really important to have that. And it's also not good enough to say, well, it's just tourists and we don't talk about it, but be precise about how you differentiate between different people. So I am in favor of restrictions, but we have to find a common workable compromise. And I'm actually really would like to hear more about this than just again ventilating the moral stance, because I don't think we'll get further with that. So that's a short statement also.
Okay. And Niels?
You hear me now?
Yes. And could you introduce yourself?
Yes,
please?
hello, Neil Kansons. I from the Latvian Foreign Ministry. Leaving aside the issue of whether or not we can affect the change in Russia, I think there's also an issue of our own security, where there might be a certain asymmetry amongst the EU member states. Those who have a land border with Russia may be more exposed than others. But when I speak of our own security, what do I mean? We have a lot of Ukrainian refugees in many countries, and those Russian tourists who espouse the Putin's views and support the aggression. It's a security risk, coming to the same place where there are a lot of Ukrainians, and they don't hide their belligerence in many cases. We've seen demonstrations on the 9th of May in several EU countries, demonstrations in support of Russian aggression by Russians there in the European countries. I don't know whether they come as tourists or they're long-term residents, but there were quite a few of those. Let us not forget that the intelligence operatives who were poisoning Skripal were coming on tourist visas. Do we need all of that now? Isn't it the time that we focus more on our own needs, on our own security, rather than trying to influence Russia, which has not worked in the better times? Thank you.
So I think we had a wide variety of voices, and I was very happy to have a Finnish voice and an Italian voice. That is how this is supposed to work, so that really Europe debates. Although there was one question whether this is actually a good thing, or whether we should not lay open our differences that much. Maybe you could comment both on that. Maybe Stefan, you could say a few words also about the security threat that was mentioned several times, whether you don't see it or whether you think you would kind of just balance it differently. And then there was a question, concrete examples on Russian tourists and EU citizens, harassment examples. I think that was partly answered already. And then I think the Serbia question, or the kind of, even if the EU would now decide on such a ban, wouldn't it be pointless, because there would be kind of a way to work around this. And maybe I give you 3 minutes each, because you answer the questions and make a final statement. And then we have another voting, and then you can enjoy the rest of your evening. And we do it in the reverse order, because Kristi started first time. So Stefan, now you can start with answering this, responding to Kristi, and try to keep it within the framework of 3 minutes.
So I just go through the questions. I think I should respond. So I don't think we should avoid public debates, to be honest. And I think we have here a very good quality debate about an important topic, which is relevant for European citizens. And I don't think it would undermine somehow the EU. I think for me, it's rather the question, do we not emotionalize ourselves sometimes with some topics, and do we lead really the right discussions? And I think this war is triggering also a lot of debates, and it's distracting also from other issues. I think that's for me that's maybe rather a point, but I think we should not avoid these kind of debates, and especially if it has a very good quality and a very good engagement. I'm just on Serbia. I was asking myself, what is with Hungary? So what if there will be more visa and easier to enter also the EU? Yeah, and I think that's maybe even more an issue, also how Hungarian-Russian relations will further develop, and what role Hungary is playing also in the EU with regard also in supporting this government, supporting Russia. And I think also on the visa issue, we remember also how it was with COVID and the vacancy, that it was an entering point also into the EU, Hungary. Yeah, so, and I think I see here rather a challenge. So maybe on the security issue, I don't want to play this down. I think it is an issue, and it is a threat, especially to the Baltic states, and maybe from a German perspective, it's easier to argue here also. But I'm not so sure if this will really make the big difference. Yeah, so I think maybe we should take care more who is really traveling. There should be a better check also of the people who are entering, and sure, you never know, and the numbers should be maybe also reduced in a way. But I think I'm just for creating less opportunities to travel, to leave Russia, and also without creating maybe other opportunities for those who really want to leave. I think that's still for me more an issue. Yeah, and I think I would really learn. I think a lot of demonstrations I think we had are not about Russian tourists. I think they are more about those who are living here already. And then it's a question of integration. So that's rather an issue, how much we invested also in integrating these people, how much they are watching Russian TV and are part of the Russian world. And I think that's maybe that's also a problem for some of the Baltic states. And this is a security issue. There's a strong support, and this is but also a problem for Germany, yeah, where there's a big majority. So I think this discussion maybe distracts also from other issues again, which we should rather discuss and fix. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And now, Kristi, some final remarks, final statement, answering the questions.
Yes, thank you. There were so many comments and questions. So I will pick up some. And I want to start actually on a point where I fully agree with Stefan. I don't see debate as weakness. We need to have these discussions, and we have them in public. They are part of the way our democratic societies reach agreement. And I'm sure that also on this issue, we continue to disagree to some extent, but in the end, we will come closer to each other. And this is our strength. But openness, when it comes to relations with a totalitarian, aggressive, violent neighbor, openness is a weakness. And there we need to think very carefully how we need to limit our openness and protect ourselves and take care of our security better. And again, another point where I agree with Stefan is that we should not kind of exaggerate the importance of this tourist visa issue. There are much more important questions to be discussed. Military support to Ukraine, above all. So the visa issue, which whatever way it goes, it doesn't make that big of a difference. And also when it comes to engaging with those Russians who are critical of the regime and who are dissidents, tourist visas are not really a solution. Okay, some of them have been able to enter the EU with tourist visas in the past months. But I also know many cases where these people have not been able to get a tourist visa. So we need to find other ways to help them and discuss this whole system. And that's again a point Stefan was making, this whole system of how we deal with these contacts that we still want to have with the Russian society. But on the security issue, I mean, in order to be able to check better the people who come in, we need to reduce the volumes. And this is really important. And this is where we need other EU countries on board, because with our own measures in the border countries, we can't do it. And my very final point on isolation, I mean, it is a tricky path with pros and cons. But I just want to stress that we are not isolating Russia because it is authoritarian or because we would then think of ways to make it democratic. We are isolating Russia because it is a revisionist, aggressive major power that is waging a war in Europe and posing a serious threat to our security. And that's the main reason why we need to isolate Russia and give up kind of naive thinking about our ability in the current situation to transform the Russian society.
Thank you very much. And now, in our last minute, your final vote. So you can vote the exact same way as you did in the beginning, or vote differently if you got convinced by one of our speakers. So the EU should ban Russian tourists from entering the Schengen area. Yes, no, or don't know. And meanwhile, I want to thank both speakers, especially for I think a very informed and informative debate. I think, and for the way you interacted, I think it's great that we debate. I think that distinguishes us from authoritarian systems. So and I'm a huge fan of the Europe debates format. So we will continue to do so. But it was also pretty clear that kind of different countries come from different perspectives. And even within the countries, people have very different perspectives. But yeah, to bring this constructively together is our challenge and our major strength. So thank you very much for kind of making your arguments, Kristi and Stefan, and in the way you did it, in a kind of very, I think, nice way towards each other. So we have a final result. First poll, yes, 35, no, 47. Don't knows 18. And the second poll? The second poll, yes, 51, no, 35, don't know, 14. So that means that I think Kristi has convinced more people than Stefan. I don't know if that will get mirrored on the EU level. I think it might not, but maybe Raphael is right, and we need a third way and kind of approach this differently and not in a yes or no way. Thank you very much for spending your evening with us. Also, dear participants, thank you for bearing with me and my moderation skills. And I hope we will be able to invite you to in-person meetings again soon. This was just for logistical reasons, better online. Have a very nice evening, and thank you very much for listening and debating with us. Have a nice evening. Bye.